welcome to this next edition of the Value Exchange podcast. I'm Annabelle Lambert. I'm here with my regular co-host, Rob Pye. Would you like to say hello, Rob Pye, today?
I am Rob. I'm Rob Pye. Hello, today.
Thank you. We are really pleased today to be joined by Lloyd Fassett, who is based in Oregon in the US. We've known Lloyd for a couple of years plus, actually, in our extended network of wonderful people that we work with. I think at the highest level, I would say that Lloyd is about helping people through technology to better find work that better matches what they really want to do, is probably the highest level that I could go. But I'm going to hand over to you, Lloyd, and ask you to explain who you are, what you're into, why, and what motivates you, and tell us a bit about yourself, as much as you like.
Oh, well, thank you very much for having me on. Yeah, those are some big questions. The whole thing about what motivates me and my story. So yeah, let me summarize in about 5 hours. But I've been in the staffing world for 20 years through HR technology is what it's called. So the tools that are used. I've also been a practitioner where I've managed agencies, and most recently, for the last 3 years, I've been a contract recruiter where I join corporate TA teams and work on actually like a salesman carrying a bag, work on filling jobs. About me, well, let's see. I'm a very, I'd say, a much more strategic person in my thinking. So I'm not like a lot of other recruiters and talent acquisition people I know. I think the thing that was more interesting that's kept me in the industry for well, I got into the industry by accident. Almost everyone I know, actually everybody I know that's in recruitment has gotten into it by accident. People don't grow up and say, I'm going to be a recruiter someday.
Tell us about the
did
accident.
that bit. I did that.
I had an accident. I had an accident as well long ago, and I kind of stumbled there. But tell us about your accident.
Well, so I was living in San Francisco. I'm a product of the first .com rise. So got out of Cornell Business School in '95 and moved to San Francisco and had a grand old time in the city during the rise of the companies we know today. Like, I was around when Google was still hosted at Stanford. That ended in the first '01 crash, and I had my first baby, and my mother-in-law ran a travel nurse business that was troubled. She was in Los Angeles or Long Beach, and so we moved closer to be closer to her, so our baby could know grandma. And I was going to temporarily like help her turn her business around, and then go back to my internet life. And 20 years later, I'm still in staffing. So I didn't want to get involved in staffing because it doesn't have a good reputation in terms of ethics, in terms of recruiters wasting people's time, in terms of businesses wasting applicant time. And when I got involved, even though I kind of was only doing it temporarily, I found from the inside it was even worse than it looked from the outside. But if you think of problems, things that you hate on a systemic level, those are also opportunities. I mean, if something's so bad, then okay, what's so bad about it, and can you fix it? And I think my story in staffing would be analogous to Sam Walton in Walmart, in that you think of Walmart and people think of retail. It's not actually retail. Their profits are because they're a logistics company and they run operations more efficiently than anyone else, and that's why they can sell products for less than their competitors. So with staffing, it's the nuts and bolts of how the process works, the business models used, and the motivations that the assumptions people are making about motivations, where it became really, really intriguing. And to me, it started to open up as one of the biggest unsolved business problems of the world, which is aligning human capital with work, with what they do. It is, if you include people's salary, it is the largest market in the world. And even if you don't include people's salaries, it approaches $1 trillion of what businesses pay to find talent. And that's not counting the time that talent spends trying to find jobs that they like. So, like Annabelle said, lining up people with jobs that they prefer, it turns out to be a super intriguing question. Understanding what they want, and then building a process that can satisfy that at scale.
Okay, so bringing it now back to your story, because we had a bit of prep that I promised to do that. So you said, recruiting from the outside didn't have a particularly good reputation. From the inside, maybe you saw it, it was maybe even worse. So I want to kind of know you. I would guess that you haven't stayed in the industry for 20 years if it was still like that for how you experience it. So I want to take people on a journey for how you experienced it along the way and what it's given you, what your challenges have been, what joy, what fun, what meaning, doing your work, I guess from the inside hasn't been 20 years of just experiencing this crazy unsatisfying world. I guess you've got a lot out of it, have you, or haven't you? I don't know.
No,
How have you experienced being a
I
recruiter?
think this is where I might diverge from most people, and this is getting into why do you do what you do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, no, I haven't had successes where I'm kind of done. Like climbed the mountain, packaged it up with a bow, sold it off, and now I'm sailing away. No, it has not been like that at all. Um, so as far as what motivates me, um, it's a super intriguing question. I think my personal story is one of persistence, unlike people that I've seen, because I've been at it for 20 years. I'm actually launching my second platform now and getting the resources. It's a long story to understand what you want to do. I am a product guy. I'm not an engineering guy. I'm the guy who'll talk endlessly to define the problem in a way that nobody else has looked at it before. But then I also have to get the resources to build the software, and building the software takes at least a year for an initial product. So yeah, raising money and then building the software. I would do what I do if somebody paid me, which I think is a pretty interesting thing. It's like, why, if I was allowed to have, to take my ideas and say, yeah, let's do this, and someone's like, yeah, that's great. Here, I'll pay you a salary. I'd be like, that's fine with me. But that's not the case. So to really do what you want to do, if you've got a vision, um, you kind of have to find your own resources, and you're going to have to be almost strategic like chess to say, I've got extremely limited resources. What can I do with what I have? More like being at war. If you, yeah, I mean, you go to war with what you got. You don't go to war with the weapons and the army you wish you had, right? Um, so the other thing about motivation for me is I guess I like I sincerely like the challenge, um, and I'm an endurance athlete as well. It's strange to want to put yourself through that kind of effort over hours and hours, and for why? That's why it's like, well, maybe you like the struggle. I don't know. I'm not someone who's motivated necessarily by like vacations. I tend to do like very active vacations, or I mix them up. My wife isn't as active as I am. Some people like to go to the beach or stay at the Ritz and have a drink and look out at the you know Gulf of Mexico, and which is fine. I'm not against that. I've done it, but I tend to want to do more. So the questions of motivation for me are I've thought about them a lot, and it's really interesting and different for me. But looking at why people are motivated for what they want, like Annabelle said at the beginning, it's kind of like a quick question, like, oh, line people up with what they really want to do. I'm like, yes, but that's complicated in defining it, and then a whole other level of defining it is understanding how sincere they are. Do they follow through on that?
But I guess the evidence of your commitment, of your sincerity, has been 20 years. It's kind of like,
It's an
okay,
endurance.
yeah. I mean, it's more like several back-to-back marathons than, I did something over the weekend. Look, I'm an entrepreneur. It's kind of like, you've got a long service medal there. Did you, did you ever think of giving up? I'd even do what I'm doing if somebody paid me to do it. It's a really interesting observation. I could do this for a living if somebody paid. But were there moments where you thought, actually, I just, do employment. I'll be employed. I'll be somebody's employee, rather than your own business, being an entrepreneur. Um, was there moments, difficulties that you sort of had questions that were serious questions? I'm not. I'm going to stop this.
Yeah, there are, and things in the real world don't come up with a neat story frequently. You
No.
know, right?
The
And
real world is a bit like that, isn't it? Oh, damn! No,
Damn the
it's
real
no, yeah.
world.
and then interpreting it turns out to be what story do I want to believe myself? Our own self beliefs are frequently wrong, delusions, ignoring facts, or at the same time, those same self beliefs are the kernel of what becomes an interesting achievement. I'm not trying to, something that actually gets done in the real world starts as an idea. Um, um, so yeah, there were times you can interpret. The other thing I'm fascinated with about personal stories and trying to look back is that you can interpret it any way you want. So it's more like, what story do you want me to have, and I'll fit the facts to tell, fit your narrative. So there are plenty of times when I guess my personal story is that I've been backfilling a way to fill my bills through contract recruiting, and talent acquisition consulting with tech companies. And as a consultant and as a contract recruiter, you're only somewhat hired in reality to provide advice. And the reason I said somewhat is that everyone always says, we want great ideas. Come, join, share your ideas. The reality is that they don't have resources for it. And most of the time, they don't have the attention. Most of the people I deal with in talent acquisition have kind of ADD. Like, they want great ideas, but their level of great idea is pick this picture that is going to get more clicks on an email. I'm like, that's not strategic, right? So it's a way of keeping my light, my flame burning.
Yeah, keeping the
To
lights on. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, keeping my flame burning is in parallel with keeping the lights on. Keeping my flame burning is like, what drives you, what motivates you, what are your dreams? And it could very well be that I want to be a photographer or I want to be a painter. But during my day job, I'm a customer service rep because that keeps the lights on. But at night, I come home and then that's everybody is not a lot of people deal with that conflict, right? How do you keep the lights on and how do you pursue your dreams?
Everybody, yeah.
Yeah, I wouldn't
So
go as
so
far as
let, let, let
I
me
wouldn't go as
let
far
me
as everybody at all. Most people don't actually have a dream. I think most people are very satisfied in life with family and friends, and actually, that's a lot of what I've learned from staffing. Um, Job is not number one for, I'd say, 80%, 60% of people, shooting 80% of people. Because if you go to someone with what appears like a obvious career step up, most of the time they're saying, no, I've got kids in school and I've got a spouse and I can't move, right? Or that's obvious. The other less obvious things are just people don't want to take a risk. They're like, no, I don't like my job, but at least it's consistent. I've been there for 5 years. I feel comfortable. So they manage for the downside, which is I don't want to have a disruption of income. I can put up with the petty things of my job because If I go to join a new place, I don't know. Maybe the business will turn south, and then I'll be out of work. And so I guess getting at the one of your questions is like, are you managing your life for the downside, or are you managing your life for the upside? What
So,
mix are
so
you doing?
Lloyd, you're exciting me greatly, which is good because it's a lot later in the UK than it is in Oregon. So so you've got this concept of keeping the flame alive. Yeah, you've probably got some great coffee there, which
This
is
is
like I
coffee.
probably need.
This is my tumbler of after
Yin.
work drink. Yeah.
So you got your flame, and you've got your lights, and you've got your family, and you've got your work. You've got, and 80% of the people you've met over the years, that work is not their number one, and yet, you know, we are one person. You are Lloyd. You're not, schizophrenic. I don't think. Where you have a completely different psychology in work to you do at home, or you do, and so we're faced with these conflicts, or competing, sides of who we are. Where, let's say, I've got a family, I've got, friends, I've got hobbies like golf, and I've got work, and yet, it's all got to come together somehow in a story that isn't full of too many conflicts that are tearing you or your world apart. Because sometimes these conflicts can tear us apart, psychologically. So that has to be managed. It has to be acknowledged that I've got I've got B, I've got this, and you strike me as someone who's been able to um, uh, manage those conflicts in a really clever way. Any advice? How do you do it? How have you done it?
There's a lot of risk, but there's also you can manage that risk by lowering your material needs. I'm actually pretty intrigued with the simple life, in terms almost Buddhist, non-materialist,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
and a common uh, devil of the issue is people making assumptions about what kind of life I have to live to. Well, how do I have to appear, right, to other people, and
Mm-hmm.
yeah, let go of that. You know, don't finance your car, don't finance your
Yeah,
housing. But if you don't and I think it's actually a real thing. I think it's easy to say don't finance your stuff,
Mm.
but in the work world, people judge you by where you went to school, what kind of car you drive, where you went on vacation, ageism. Because I'm interested in mapping human capital to work, and the assessment of what a person's skills are not the main driver why people get hired, right? So yeah, managing that balance is it's interest. It's
sorry, what
um,
do you mean by what their skills are is not what people hire? Just unpick that a bit for us. What did you
Oh,
what did,
sure.
what did you mean by,
So
yeah?
there's well, because and I love questions like that because a lot of times people make assumptions on statements like the one I made, but you got to dive into them and actually start to dissect them because um, that's where the meat of the matter is. So dissecting that can be hard binary things that are easier to quantify, such as I'm a registered nurse, and the state government, federal government says I have a license to do this. That's binary, and I can check that. And all of a sudden, you're going to narrow the world down of what you can do for work with that degree by 99.9%. All of a sudden, you're just going to be down to that. Now, let's take something like being a barista. Well, there's a lot of alternatives to being a barista. Not only is that not a licensed thing, but there are things that might motivate that person in another way that they could equally be qualified for. So their considered set is different. So a lot of what it can break down to is what kind of trade offs does a person have in being matched to work, versus professions that are more binary and don't. I mean, there's other examples could be like if you're not just a software developer, but you develop on the SAP platform, right? And what experience you have. And while that's not licensed, it can be tested. So uh, assessing the quality of what a person says they do is another way of diving in, um, to looking at binary versus non-binary decisions about.
Do you also, in breaking that down, look at skills that are soft skills or aptitudes? So these are more about your character than your qualifications. Is that something that also, because it just, whenever I hear that word skills, it triggers me to ask people to break it down, because just as you say, nobody has a common, definition, if you like, that it means different things to different people.
Yeah, so I'm not a fan of tests that do personality matching for
No.
companies for a few reasons. There's about 16,000 vendors out there that say that they can do that.
I
But
was
the
going to say
reason,
there's about 16,000 reasons that I'm not a fan of them, but there you go. It's
yeah.
like,
But the basic premise of trying to assess somebody's soft skills, I think, makes assumptions that the employer is right. I always want to turn it around and say, okay, employer, what are you going to do to change your business to fit, somebody else's needs? And
what a
they
great
never.
point.
The whole industry is not based on that. The industry is based on, I'm the king, you fit me. And I'm like, that's
Yeah,
that's not going to work.
No,
That's not.
yeah.
Yeah.
And
So,
it's not
so
working.
so
but
you know,
even in personal qualifications, I've interviewed thousands of candidates and lined them up with hundreds of hiring managers, and it's hiring managers. They want someone who's a cultural fit, but assessing the cultural fit is really hard, and they actually the hiring process is not the main thing that they do for a living. What they do is they make a widget or they manage a process, and they just need someone to step into my team. So it's kind of a gut check. Like, does this person talk in sentences, right? And then they look at if they fit those hard skills, it's a lot easier. If it's a soft skills assessment, I guess they kind of do what they can, but a lot of the decision making is pretty damn arbitrary, which gets back to like a person's personal story. The theme of the podcast is that um, I think there's a lot more arbitrariness in the processes that lead to our outcomes. So looking at your personal story and looking at my personal story, I would get back to the fact that I embrace the fact that the outcome is not determined by what I do. There's just too many damn factors. There's a lot of luck, a lot of arbitrariness. In that, so my story is reflected upon how I've seen hiring managers make decisions.
and so early on in this chat, you said I'm a product guy. I love it when people say I am. I don't know whether that was intentional or but I picked it up. I thought, okay, because I wanted to contrast that with I'm in hiring because I'm a people person. I am a people. I like people and people. And I just wondered where the intersection of people and product come in your life, because you've got lots of people in your life, because your job you do, involves talking to people, finding out who they are, what they want to do, and yet the flame you've talked about, the problem you're interested in solving, is a product flame. It's kind of like I kind of want this product to. So the people versus product. Do you have any reflections on what you like, what you don't like about the people, the product, the kind of the different dimensions of what you do? Is the
Um,
question clear?
no, but that's okay. Because I'm going back and forth between my product as a contract recruiter is related to but different from the product that I've built as a platform for staffing.
I'm
So
interested in the product that you built as a platform versus um, the
personal story.
interaction you have with people to do with the product or to do with your contract recruiting. It doesn't matter. Your friends,
Okay.
your family, and so I want to dance between being a product manager, which is about your product that you built, that not not contract recruiting, versus the role that people have in your life. Some people I'm a tech. I've got a computer science degree. I love talking to code, when nobody else. But my day job, I spend talking to people. I get quite tired in doing that, and I dance also between being a closet product manager,
It's
and it very
it's a
much is in the closet, and
yeah,
and
it's a
you know.
it's that is more clear. It's a super fascinating question because code is a way of taking our understanding of the world and generalizing it into a recurring process that creates some value. And the product managers who can identify a need in a market that's not fulfilled by either a lack of the product in that category or like Walmart mapping the need in the world to a process that fulfills that need, that is the damn kind of point, right? Is that Sam Walton says people will buy a lot of product if I make it less expensive. I mean, do you have to go out and market test that? No. But there are other categories of product where you do have to market test it. Say it's a luxury item, like I'm going to make this fabric, this shirt. Um, and while on the surface that sounds different, my understanding is that people in that profession actually take those cycles and start to identify those patterns, and they start to say, in fashion, fast fashion is an unmet market, and that's become a thing in the last 20 years. Some of the fashion on the West Coast, I don't know about New York, but has been production has been brought back to the US because the fashion cycles are down to like weeks or a week, right? So we need to make something and deliver it to stores in days, and they're doing it, but you have to bring the production back. So that's
Mm.
all. Me, product management is. I never really knew the difference too much between product management and CEO. I mean, the product guy to me is the guy who finds the value, like a Sam Walton that maps it to process, or a fashion person that identifies this is going to be the trend. Um, that's where a lot of the value comes from. As far as I can tell, the CEO is more of a perfunctory role because they also have to raise the money. They got to run payroll. They got to make sure they're in compliance. They do like perfunctory things. But anyway, yeah, product manager is where the value identification I think is made. That's what I'm doing in my
So
in my system. It's a totally different way of letting people define what they do and what they want to do, and then using that to be the foundation of a matching process to um, send them just what's interesting, which is
So
not
just
easy.
to unpick that a little bit, how if I'm kind of unpicking, so I'm Rob, how do I use your product to unpick what I would like to do? I'm in the market for a job. I'm kind of coming to Lloyd's platform, Lloyd's product, and how do I specify that? How do I
Well,
how do I
what
give you
we
my
do is so we created a product that allows people to create a binary structured data from 20 different categories. And you go into a category and you say, this is where I am in this category. We search our database of terms. If it exists, then we reuse it. If it doesn't exist, we check Wikipedia. If it doesn't exist there, then a user creates it, right? So the big three categories are location, employment type, and occupation, right? So I look quite deeply at things like in the U.S. the federal government has had an ontology for occupations called ONET since 1937. And in the European Union, the equivalent is called ESCO. And those are just woefully lean. Like they have 900 or occupations in ONET. I mean, it's like ridiculously short. Where I think the market need is needs to be undefined. I think the number will probably end up around 20,000 or 40,000. Depends on even how you want to define people who say, well, I'm a sub of nurse.
Yeah.
I'm this super specialty thing, right? So we allow people to categorize themselves in that way across those big three and 17 others. Some of the others could be like, I'm proficient at this piece of equipment. I code in this kind of software. But it's really relevant and a great question, Rob, because the process of going from undefined to structured is the point and almost the definition of what we were talking about for product and being a product person. In this case, I've created a tool that lets people create a product that you could call themselves. You could say whatever you want to say. I am great at this or that or the other thing. And if somebody else is looking for that term, or if our technology can say that you should be looking for this term, or this term is related to that term, we use that as one of the inputs for ranking what you should look at. So our system comes up with, we'll look at an infinite amount of data and then say, this is the one thing that should be interesting to you. We send it out to you and you give us some feedback like, no, that's horrible. Okay, well, we can adjust your profile. We can change your profile. We can change the matching algorithm. But there's a recurring loop, right? And that information loop turns out to be, I think, one of the basic patterns in life that I'm putting into code, but you see it in all kinds of ways of how language is even used between people and how languages develop. So feedback loops are a big deal. In my particular case, I don't think that they've been put into code enough yet in a way that goes very broadly, or even a way that goes in a narrow way. But is that close
Yeah,
enough?
so I think you've taken the half of the question that was about product and you've nailed it, beautifully. Interestingly, years ago we did a project called Skills Planner where we had a couple of million of funding to look at construction, and you might remember the project.
I think that's when we first met. That's when we first met, wasn't it? I think
first met, and we put a hell of load of money into, but we ran into exactly the problem that you described there, in that the industry had its shopping list of what it was about, qualifications and skills, and it did not match what they actually wanted. I'm a bricklayer, and yet they were buying modern methods of construction, which are all about prefabrication and like buildings with Lego rather than bricks. So you kind of had a matching problem where you didn't have a vocabulary to do anything in future, and it almost, millions of pounds later, fell apart because you were kind of solving the wrong problem. You were never going to use a common ontology or breakdown of terms, where those terms were from the 1900s, and they hadn't changed a lot since.
Yeah, the thing
The
that
other half, the other half of the question, I want to move because I'm coming across this. I'm a product guy. Is the role of people? Are there people in the product team? Where do people fit in your life, and what is the sort of is the role of recruiter scratching a people need in your life? Do you I've got loads of people because I do that for a living. I talk to people all day, and that it's great because I like people, and we talk. Is that, how does the people and product side square? So talk about the people a little bit. Is that something that
I talk a
you know,
little bit about that,
provides.
and then I do want to circle back to Skills Planner because I think that's really interesting how we came to know each other. It's probably 7 years ago, and it wraps up
Mm.
into
Yeah.
my story of why I've been at this for 20 years and what the hell is taking so long. It's all relevant. But as far as the one question, I'm not sure you're asking this about the people issue, but there is an issue of when we get people to create a profile that is structured data. And by the way, the structured data can include things that you don't find on resumes, is kind of the point, like how much money do you want to make and when are you available and your employment type. These are all things that isn't captured on any profiling system yet, but yet needs to go into a matching algorithm. There is a step where I feel that when I talk to candidates and I'm recruiting them, I'm doing two things. One of them is I'm selling. So they hire recruiters are hired when jobs aren't filling themselves. And you need to be a salesperson. You need to say why this job is, why you should take a risk at changing, at leaving your comfortable situation and joining this new thing. So there is a human element to it. And as far as my platform goes, it'll probably have two services. One is competing with communities like a Craigslist, which, by the way, is my favorite business model because they've been making 500 million to $1 billion a year for a decade, and they employ like 50 people. The most wildly profitable internet company, and it's not talked about nearly enough to say what are they doing? Why are they more profitable than any of the other FANG companies? The other thing is assessing to a hiring manager in writing your call notes and your recommendation. So you are bridging this gap. And the second part of my business will be businesses that value that. It's very expensive. And I know like you said, you like talking to people all day long, but I bet you that doesn't really scale across 1,000 or 10,000 people,
No.
right? So you got to look deeply at what value, what is going on in those conversations, and it's one to one, which there's a role in the world for. So if a business wants to have candidates phone screened and summarized by a recruiter and they want to pay for that, then that'll be a service too. Which, by the way, that's just the way talent acquisition works today. When you talk to a recruiter at a business, they are summarizing your information and passing you along and trying to sell you. They don't do it particularly well. The other figment of the talent acquisition world is that it's been really fascinating that every business has to run their own. It's the equivalent of every business running their own electrical generating plant to power their. It's like silly. There's no data reuse between them. So I'm creating a way that has a lower cost structure by reusing data between businesses to qualify and connect talent. Um, so the the fact that it's vertical in every business really means that it's not a highly regarded. This is part of getting back to the top of the conversation about what is wrong with talent acquisition. It's not a core part of what businesses do. They make cars or movies or whatever it is they do. Talent acquisition is just like accounting or payroll. It's like just get it done. I'm not going to concentrate on it. I'm not going to innovate around that area, and they shouldn't. So there's a huge opportunity to innovate around making that higher quality and significantly less costly. It's a huge problem that a lot of people have tried. But back to like what motivates me, I think of it as the Mount Everest that has yet to be climbed by the internet, right? The internet has yet to change human capital. And I'm happy to spend probably 2 lifetimes trying to be that person, which is one of probably a few hundred, right? It's an easy to identify problem. And there have been, probably approaching $1 billion of venture capital money because it's easy to identify. All right. But nobody has cracked that nut yet. It's still all these vertically run uh, uh, processes within each company. Can I circle back to what you were talking about with Skills Planner? Because I know
Please.
we're starting to. Well, we might be running out of time,
Yeah.
and I think
Yeah.
this is really an important thing about what brought us together in my story of 20 years. We started talking to each other about halfway through my 20-year process of making it making a better way for people to get jobs that are optimum for them. I learned about linked data. I was trying to solve that problem, and then I learned about linked data. And then I met Ron Shaw at a W3C conference about the future of work, and that he introduced you and I together. So linked data is a fantastic platform, a way of sharing, right? And potentially mapping over to that problem with Skills Planner. It turns out people don't want to share. It's like super fascinating because data, the way our databases are structured right now, in rows and columns, provides a lot of control, and there's a lot of profit that comes out of putting a wall around your content and charging for access to it. It's not built for sharing. It's not built for that common ontology or vocabulary to go between systems. But I think and I had mentioned business model just as a word earlier, but the existing business models are meant to aggregate information and then charge for access to it. That is as old as dirt. That's the same as newspaper classifieds, in my view.
Yeah.
So if you I'm trying to create a system that is much more open and changes how it creates value by learning from interactions. So most systems are meant to narrow down access, whereas if you have a more open system, such as a Craigslist marketplace or like a Google itself, um, then you have to have a different way of, it opens up opportunities to create value in a different way. Now, the reason that the skills, I wasn't really a part of Skills Planner, but I was aware of it. It was what we had talked about back in the day. I thought a part of the issue was that this is back when Brexit happened. So it was like, feels like a while ago now. And then when that happened, you weren't going to be able to bring in talent from Poland and other Eastern European countries. And there was all these restrictions about we have to have bricklayers that live within 20 miles of the work site. And wasn't it all about building a like a major sewage infrastructure underneath the Thames?
Yeah, Thames
Yeah.
Tideway, and the issue again. You've put the nail on the head. Employers didn't want to share because if you got all of these big employers to share the data about what their future employment needs would be, you would kind of eliminate the problem that one company finishes their project on this date, the next one finishes on the following month. Everybody's laid off that contract and then employed on a different, but there's no continuity on from behalf of the workforce, and the lack of sharing, both
Mm.
from a candidate perspective and a employer. If I want a bricklaying apprenticeship, I've got to apply 20 times until I get one, or 100 times. Why not apply once and then reuse that for anyone who's looking for an apprentice bricklayer? And likewise, from an employment, let's look at all the people who want Java programmers and try and optimize it across the whole system rather than just using a competition metaphor. Like, you hear employers talk about the war for talent. I win, you lose. It's a zero sum game. Well, actually, talent is not a zero sum game, at all. It doesn't have to be, particularly in a world of work where workforces are hypermobile. So, yeah, Annabelle, I am conscious of
Yeah,
the
and
time. Lloyd
yeah.
and I have got on one.
So I'm just going to open the floor for anything else, any closing matters that anybody would like to raise before we draw stumps, and we can always reconvene, Lloyd, and carry on
Oh,
at
Yeah,
some
I mean,
part two, Lloyd Fassett part two.
without
Uh,
it doesn't need to be a
no.
podcast or a webinar, but I think this subject of your passion for the product and the recruitment space is something that's not going to go away. It's sort of
Mm.
it's a recurring uh, opportunity to collaborate. So, I want to thank you for sharing and having
Yeah.
such a brilliant contribution today. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I do want to throw out you a closing thought, something that's new and not expected. I'm sure I would think is that in my journey, ended up looking at marketplaces and realizing that it's a talent marketplace, like you said, for Java developers or bricklayers. Why can't you just apply once to many jobs? Um, a lot of seminal work was done by an American economist named Ronald Coase, Coase. He only died.
Yep,
Oh,
yep, yep.
oh, you know him? Yeah.
Yep.
Well,
Yeah,
then
yeah,
you're
yeah.
okay. So his four tenets of why marketplaces work, I think, is totally unappreciated and unrecognized, and it leads to a more effective business model. And the word sharing is probably not the right word, more like optimal, because you got a bricklayer who wants to make as much money as possible, and you got employers who want to pay as little as possible. And there's something in that negotiation that doesn't happen in the current world today. Right now, it's done one on one, which is like your conversations that you're talking about that you're doing all day, which is great for probably spot on for the content you're dealing with. But if you're looking at a job that can be filled by many people and many people that can fill a job, there isn't yet a scalable way to do that negotiation. He was also, he outlined that qualification of the information is a big deal, as well as making sure that contracts are followed after they're signed. And the most important thing is search. I mean, he was talking about search in the 40s. His basic thesis, his question was, why would a automobile company? Well, he had two questions I'll hit you with. One of them is, why would an automobile company partner with a body company back when automobiles were frames on the bottom and bodies were different? Why don't they just own the two? So he looked a lot at alliances and when does it make sense to bring something in, and when does it make sense for a business to go to the marketplace. The second one was he started out with a talent acquisition question. Why are American railroads so big? Back in the 20s, they employed 200,000 people. The answer was it's the cost of there's too much friction and cost to find talent. But he said back in his first paper, which was published around 35, he's like, why don't businesses just tap the talent marketplace for what they need when they need it? The answer was that it's too expensive to do that. And he spent his whole life coming up with those four tenets that I just mentioned. And as far as search goes, a part of the problem with that is that we don't have the data indexed like the ones I mentioned. Like, how much do you want to make? Well, don't talk to me about jobs. As a recruiter, I talk to people all the time. And it's frustrating because the tools I have, you reach out to people and they're like, why are you offering me a job that's 50% less than what I'm making? Right? Well, because I don't know what you're making. And that's just pay. So it's, yeah, the lining up of talent with work is super fascinating. Um, yeah, it's been my life's work. It would be I would go through two lives doing it because it's such a complicated and interesting problem that is logistics overlap with understanding people.
Well, good luck with that.
I think that comes across. Lloyd, thank you very. Until the next time,
so
we've got to
much.
keep in touch.
Yeah,
Definitely,
Thanks,
we've
Lloyd.
got lots to talk about. Thank you so much.
Bye.